Hey guys, I've just played a fascinating training game that I want to share with you. Very instructive, crazy variations occurred on the board, and this game will help you understand how to crush the ALEKHINE or the ALEKHINE's defense with white. 1 e4 and black replies knight to f6. So this game was played between me playing as white and my friend Andrew Ashukov playing with the black pieces. He's a strong candidate master, rated around 2100 over the board FIDE rating. And as you might know, I have embarked on a journey to train to become a FIDE master, so I'm regularly playing those training games against him. He's training as well, so we are like buddies in this journey, and this is really fascinating. So let's check out the game. So as usual, I open up with 1 e4, knight f6 is the ALEKHINE or ALEKHINE's defense, named after the great Russian world chess champion, the 4th world chess champion, Alexander Alekhine or ALEKHINE. So e5 is the main move, the knight gets booted again, and then d4, I take the center, and f4 is the 4 pawns attack, the most principled way to combat the ALEKHINE's defense. The computer really likes it. Those 4 pawns create this formation that looks a bit dangerous, I might say, and most ALEKHINE players I've spoken to believe that this is the most principled and the best way to combat this opening. So I have taken a lot of space. But the problem for white in this variation could be the fact that those pawns are a little bit overextended and could become targets for the black pawns and pieces. But let's see what happens next. So black goes g6. This is one of the lines in the 4 pawns attack. If you play this with white, you should also study the line with d takes, f takes, and then knight c6 attacking this pawn, and it's very important to go bishop e3 here. So there are some lines like bishop f5, knight c3 here. Analyze it with your computer to find the best plans for white if you want to play this. But my opponent Andrew surprised me by going g6. This is a more modern approach to the ALEKHINE's defense, and I honestly don't really know the theory in this one, so I played it by ear, so to say. Knight c3, bishop g7. You know, the ALEKHINE's defense is not the most popular one. I think I've never encountered it in classical chess, on my level at least. Maybe in childhood when I played I did encounter it, but over the last several years, I've only played this in bliss with white. So bishop e3, I just make some logical moves, develop, take the center. And here bishop e6 was blissed out by my opponent, which is a move that I really was afraid of a little bit after he did this, because obviously this was part of his prep. So this move looks bad, but it probably isn't bad. I decided over the board, and I was correct, actually. This is, as Andrew told me, Lila's recommendation. Lila is the second best chess engine in the world, the first one being Stockfish, obviously. And Lila really likes this maneuver. So the idea is that you provoke d5 from white, which is the most natural move. You just move the pawn forward and also attack the bishop. How bad could it be? But then the bishop goes back to c8. That's what I had to calculate over the board. And I thought, yeah, the black pieces are passive, all on the back rank, but my pawns are really overextended. And now that my pawn moved from d4 to d5, the e5 pawn is not too protected, and black can chip away at my pawns after like maybe knight f3, c6, for example. And later on, maybe if I take, for example, this can get dangerous for me because the knight takes, and then this pawn is attacked already 3 times, and I don't feel too comfortable with this position. The computer finds some slight advantage for white after c5, which is a move that probably could be found off the board, yeah, but this is not something I wanted to calculate. And obviously he knew the d5 response, which is the most logical. So I've decided I won't do as he wants to. I want to impose my own play. So I decided I don't have to go d5, actually. I don't have to advance. And I went knight f3, which is not the best move according to the computer, but on higher depth, the computer says it's perfectly fine. But the best move in the position, the computer, after some thought, believes that b3 is best. d5 is also playable, but b3 is a little bit better, protecting this pawn. But I decided I can protect that pawn later, because after knight f3, he cannot actually take. Because if I take, well, he can, but it's not dangerous for me because takes, and I have this queen a4 check, which is a double attack on the queen, on the king, and on the bishop. So he has to block, and then I take. And if he goes here, for example, this is a very nice trick I have. Knight takes with a check and white wins because the queen cannot take on pain of, this fork. So yeah, so after knight takes b5, he would have to take, I take, and this looks nice for me. So I've briefly calculated this. I'm not losing a pawn, and I'm not afraid of this variation. So I decided let him take, but he didn't take, he just castled. And now the threat is to take this pawn because it's attacked 2 times and I have just one defender. And I briefly considered b3, but then I decided I don't want to open up this diagonal in future for his bishop. So I went queen b3, which is the top engine choice, by the way. So I found some nice moves here. So here he went, after some thought, he took on e5. I took, and he went queen c8. He already was out of his prep at this point. He was preparing for something else. But already the computer doesn't like my opponent's position. So you could say that the ALEKHINE's defense has been not crushed maybe, but at least put under some pressure and under some questioning in this line. Because I have those 3 marvelous center pawns. They look so great. This is big white centers, as they say. And his knight is still not developed. And if it goes here, I have the d5 fork, so it cannot activate on c6. If it goes to d7, then this bishop might become a target. For example, if I go h3 and then d5, and the bishop goes here, then g4 could follow, and this bishop could become a target. So this is really unpleasant, and queen c7 is not the best move, but I don't really have too many recommendations to black in this position. So the computer says a5 is best, but I don't see any threat in this move. I can go knight here, for example, and a4, just queen c2 or queen c3 even, the computer says, and I'm pleasantly better. I'm very centralized. This is a dream position. So he didn't like something about this threat also, so in some variations the b7 pawn could get weak, and also he wants to prepare c5, which is a pawn break. He wants to undermine my powerful center, so he went queen c8. And apparently I missed here an opportunity to make a very strong computer move, which not many humans, I think, would see, h3. So the idea is, once you see it, it's logical, but I never thought even about this as a candidate move. The idea is that now this bishop doesn't have this square, and if it goes to this square after d5, then I have g4, and it gets really unpleasant. For example, if he goes knight here, I have d5. Very powerful. And if he goes here, I have g4. The bishop doesn't have any square, so it has to go back, and then I have c5. And my pawn phalanx is destroying everything. This knight doesn't have any moves, so it will have to sacrifice itself, and already white is winning. White is up a pawn, so, or up a piece even. So here, after h3, c5, what he wanted to do and what he did after my other move that I made is met also by d5. And yes, he has the d7 square, but his pieces are really clumsy here. The knight cannot go out to any good square. And here the computer suggests a4, threatening a5, and this knight also has no squares. So it gets really dangerous for black. Bishop e8 is the best move according to the computer, and after a5, knight 6 goes to d7, and all black's pieces are on this small part of the board, whereas my pieces are very active and dominating across the whole board. So yeah, this is a fantastic position. So it's a pity I didn't even consider the move h3. I considered some other moves, but I decided to just continue my development. And you should know that and bishop e2 is not the best move. The computer says it's a miss because of the missed opportunity to go h3. You know, we played 35 minutes per player with 30 seconds added after each move. So time is of the essence here. It's not blitz, it's not rabbit, but it's not classical in the classical sense of this word. So we have to be a little bit faster, to think a little bit faster, to take decisions. Sometimes they are not optimal, but you have to make the moves. So that's what I did. I decided bishop e2 could not be a bad move. I'm preparing to castle this way. I briefly considered castling long, and it's also fine, but I decided that could give him some counterplay after c5 and opening up some lines. So yeah, bishop e2, and he strikes with c5. That's logical. And here there are two moves, both quite liked by the computer, d5 or d takes c5. I decided to take on c5 because he cannot take back for the moment, he has to retreat. And yes, he will eventually take either this or that pawn, but I'm still up in space, I'm still up in development. This knight is still not developed. So I just jump in with my horse to d5. This is the move that I've seen in advance, and I liked it very much. My threat is to take this pawn with a fork, check, and fork to the king and the queen. So he has to defend. I thought he'll go knight c6 here. That seemed like the most obvious move to me. I didn't ask my opponent why he didn't do that. Probably he was afraid of some deflection tactics on the knight, like knight d4. And if the knight gets taken here, then this pawn becomes vulnerable. I will be able to take it and with a check. And once the king moves back, I can take, and the queen is still hanging. But there's nothing too crazy about this position. Also, I was calculating actually knight c6. I was preparing for this move. I was trying to think on his time. And I found this variation. Knight takes c5, attacking my queen, so I have to retreat. And then all the moves for black lose except one. Bishop takes d5, because otherwise his knight is hanging. And also I'm threatening to take first this knight and then take this pawn with a check and a fork, as I already told you. So after queen a3, the best move and the only move for black is taken. But it's good enough, because in this position he can take and just go back with his knight. And now this pawn is hanging. And yes, my pawns look menacing, but they are weaknesses. So if I protect like this, for example, he has queen c7, and this pawn is attacked, or even queen b8, the computer says. Yeah, and this pawn is attacked 3 times already. Knight, queen, and bishop. Whereas it's protected just 2 times, so I have to push it now. And this is the computer variation that's given. Takes, knight e5. Nice. Well, yeah, and I cannot castle. This file is open, and I cannot castle. So I should castle long, but my king is really weak, and I don't like this position. Obviously, I didn't calculate everything, but I was preparing for the move after knight d5, the move that I made. I was preparing for knight c6, and I was calculating knight d4. Also, I thought that I could castle here. The computer actually thinks castling is better, not to go for this giving up the c5 pawn. So that would have been a different game, but he went rook a8, surprising me, rook a8. I thought it's not the best move, because this rook is stuck defending this pawn, not the best square for this rook, and this knight should have developed, and it will get developed somehow in future. So here I decided to castle, which is a logical move, finishing my development. I'm a little bit better, his pieces are still stuck. Yes, this pawn of mine is weak, but I decided that it's nothing too crazy. He can take this pawn in this position, or he can take this pawn in the position. He decided to take the e5 pawn, which is the best move. If he took this pawn, I would have gone queen a3, attacking this knight, and yeah, he could have defended, but this pawn is more important, so he took the e5 pawn. Here I thought for some time, and I decided I need to go for activity. And I went with my knight to d4, which is a mistake, but it's such a beautiful post for the knight. Now those 2 knights in the center are controlling very many squares. You should put your knights in the center. This is a good rule of thumb. So this knight controls those squares and looks great on this outpost. This knight also is impressive. It attacks the bishop. It can rotate this way and jump in via c7. It's a good knight. It's defending the bishop. It's serving many purposes. So this is like a multi-purpose horse. But apparently this is not the best move, because he finds the great response bishop g4. He does not want to give up the bishop for a knight, and this position is around equal. So I take, he takes, and here I find the strongest move, knight b5. The computer likes it, but it's kind of obvious. I want to fork him over here, and my two knights are teasing his pieces and not letting them develop in a proper way. Here I was calculating bishop e5. I thought it's the most logical response, protecting the square and also attacking the h2 square. I intended to go h3, and that was the variation that could have happened here, which is around equal. But he went for a different plan. He went for knight a6, which is also a good move. He protects the c7 square with his knight, but this knight is a little bit clumsy on the square, but it also attacks the c5 pawn, which is important, and he wants to win it. Here, I thought for some time, and I decided I'm not afraid of him taking this pawn. I need to finish my development. Rook a to e1, and the computer says it's one of the best moves. It's okay. And here he makes a mistake. Already we are in time trouble, so this is all logical that things like that happen. Also, check out the cats running in the background in our game. All of my cats, I have 3 cats and 2 dogs. Well, 2 of my cats came to the playing table in that evening. They were interested in the game. So he took the pawn, which turns out to be a blunder, surprisingly. I was calculating this variation, and I thought this is the most logical move. I thought he'll go here, because of course he can first take my bishop with his knight, and if I take, then take here. But he cannot actually, because this is hanging. So this is a check, and again a fork, and not pleasant. He has to give up the rook for the knight, and this is practically win for white. So because of this, taking the bishop is not advised here, but taking the pawn I thought is very logical, because I drop back and he takes and I take here and it's okay. But apparently I missed a win here. So let's take a look at this again. So he took, I taken my queen. Of course, I don't want to take him, because he will take with the queen and it will be a check and a bad position for white. Let me just show it on the board. Actually, it's practically losing, because he has this knight f2 check and a beautiful mate. If I go king g1, knight h3, a classical mate after sacrificing a queen. You should know this pattern if you are a chess player. So obviously I wouldn't have fallen for that, but taking this knight is stupid. I was considering queen a3. I taken this knight, and I was calculating this and then taking with the queen. But turns out I could have taken with the rook and gotten practically winning position. This is very strange. So the idea is that if he drops back with a knight, for example, let's say this move, I'll just take. And it's a fork again, and he has to give up the rook, and it's over. If he doesn't move the knight, if he, for example, goes e6 to not allow anything to happen, then this is the move. So the knight left a6 from where it was controlling the c7 square, and now I can comfortably fork both rooks and win an exchange. Turns out actually that this is not trivial. The computer now says a6 is strong. Wow, very interesting. You know what's the top computer choice in this position? You will never guess this. Rook takes f7. Wow. Sacrificing the rook, because if he takes, I have 96 with a fork. Well, it's not that difficult to find, I think, once you see it. Wow. So knight b c7 would have been better, forking the rooks, because this a6 resource now does not come into play. So this would be, well, maybe not winning, but much better for white had I taken with a rook. But I almost automatically took with a queen. I briefly considered taking with a rook, but I didn't think that it's good, because my queen is on the outskirts of this board, and you should generally try to centralize your queen. So the lesson of this game for me is to carefully consider all possible recaptures, because had I spent a minute more on this move, I already had low time, but I could have spent a minute here. I would have seen this because this rook is eyeing this square. This is very important. If the knight leaves to this square, to this, or to this square to protect against those forks, still I can take on e7 because this queen is on a3. Whereas in the game, I took back with the queen and he dropped back. And now he's blocking the e-file and I cannot take on e7 because he'll just take back. This is the difference. The queen would have been on a3 in the other variation, eyeing this square, this classical right triangle, as they say. So yeah, that was a miss by me. I go queen f2 in this position, attacking f7, and I want to go for an attack. I already think that my position is dubious. I'm not sure what to do. I was calculating here f5. I thought this is a logical move and I didn't realize what to do here. Probably I would have found queen a3, which is the best computer choice in this position, putting pressure on this knight. For some time I was even calculating, my mind wasn't working too well in this game. I was even calculating this sack because I thought I can fork him and then win back material, but turns out it's a very bad decision. Probably I wouldn't do that, but I was seriously considering it because queen e4, I think I would have found it. And bishop d4 is a threat to pin me, so I have to go rook d1. He has e6, and if I take, okay, I can drop back, but this pawn also gets taken. He's up 2 pawns. Yeah, this is winning for black. So this is a bad decision. This would be a bad decision, but probably I wouldn't go for that. If I saw f5 on the board, probably I would find queen e3. But after queen e3, it's around equal. The computer gives this interesting variation, a6. Because otherwise, this knight is hanging, and if he protects with the king, then g4 is very dangerous, and I am attacking him. He will not survive this. g4, f4, for example, I have... wow, the computer gives knight takes e7, powerful sacrifice. So he cannot take my queen, obviously, because of the pin. But if he takes the knight, I have this fork again, knight d6. He drops back, I take the queen. He takes my queen because now his king has left the f-file. But I take with check, and this is winning for white. Very beautiful. A beautiful sequence of moves that neither of us found and calculated because we had no time. So we were playing already on instinct. My opponent, Andrew, told me after the game that he decided to take this pawn. Turns out it's the best engine move. So he decided to do that because he thought that with this bishop, he will never get mated. So I take with check, but he just drops back to h8, and he thought, I'll not get mated. Both of your horses are hanging, so I'll find a way to at least make a draw. That's what he thought. And he was correct in his assessment of the position. I thought the queen c4 move is a little bit dubious, given me this f7 pawn, but turns out he was absolutely right. So I take his horse, he takes mine, and the position is a little bit more pleasant for black, but with precise play we can make a draw here. But we have no time, that's the problem. We already have no time. We are playing with a couple of minutes on the clock. And here I decide to not waste too much time and go with my gut feeling, with my intuition, to go and attack rook f7. This is an inaccuracy according to computer. Of course, the computer screams that I'm stupid, but not a huge one, actually. The computer has thought about this for some time now and thinks that rook f7 is the top line. Yeah, so this question mark and exclamation mark, they are from the analysis on the lower depth. On higher depth, the computer says it's a good move. So I'm not as bad as I thought. So the idea is, in some variation, to sacrifice the rook and to open up an attack with checks on this king. So this is one idea. The other idea is to take this pawn, because I'm attacking it multiple times already. And I was feeling really confident about my position at this point. I thought I can trick him somehow. Yes, he's up a pawn, but his king is weak. I'm attacking. Yes, my king is also weak. This diagonal is open, for example. But still, I was confident. My intuition told me that I have something here. He went rook d8 here. And here I spent some time calculating the sacrifice, which the computer says would have been a good move, but not the decisive move that could give me any advantage. Rook takes g7. And I was calculating king takes g7. queen e5 check. And here I was somehow convinced that he should go king h6, which is a losing move. The computer finds all the best moves, but it's not trivial. With 1 or 2 minutes on the clock, it's not easy to calculate all this. This is beautiful, by the way. Pause the video to find the winning sequence of moves if you'd like to do that. So the winning sequence of moves is queen f4 check. Obviously, I saw that, and I thought that this is like just a repetition of moves. Queen e5 check, king h6, queen f4. But turns out that after king g7, I can check him on e7. Rook takes e7. And if he takes, I'm not taking with my knight. No, I have this queen f6 check. And this is very beautiful. If he goes back, this is just checkmate on the board. The knight and the queen are working very nicely together. So he cannot go back. He has to go to the h file. And now I don't take his rook. And I don't give him perpetual check. But I use my queen as a pendulum in a swinging fashion, checking him again, making him move back, and then, and only then, I take with a check. This is very instructive. I think you should remember this maneuver. And when he moves here, I can just take the rook, and I'm up a full knight, and he has no perpetual checks, so that would be winning. This is beautiful, actually. Wow. But rook e7 is not the easiest move to find. You are not looking for such moves, because if you don't see the combination, then you won't consider this move, because this is just stupid. You have queen c5 check with a fork on the knight and the king, and you lose. So knight takes e7 would be the natural move, but queen f6, yeah. Had I seen this on the board, I would have found queen f6, but from distance, seeing all this in a matter of seconds, well, not easy at all. So yeah, let's take a look at this position again. My opponent, Andrew, after the game told me that he would not want to go for king takes g7 and enter those complications because he wasn't sure he'll survive here. Actually, he would survive here. The computer finds king g8. And I really didn't consider even this move because I saw that the knight could take the pawn with check and open up the way for my queen to take his queen. Rook takes, queen takes. But I didn't calculate it till the end, and I didn't realize that this rook is also hanging here with check. And we get this position where he has two rooks and I have one queen. And it's equal. The computer says it's a draw. Fascinating. So usually in such positions, two rooks are even a little bit more powerful than a queen. But here this king is weak because this diagonal is open, this diagonal is open, so I will have perpetual checks in all the variations. Still, it's very, very interesting. So that's one of the variations that were available in this game. Also, another one was knight takes, rook takes, and I can take the rook instead of taking the queen, the variation that I just showed you. So taking the rook is also a draw because he checks me. I go here and he has, for example, rook f8 and the material is equal. Both kings are a little bit weak and no one has an advantage. So yeah, fascinating. That could have happened after rook takes g7, but he wouldn't have taken, he told me. He didn't want to go for those complications. He wanted to take on d5, and that's the right approach. But if he takes right away, this is a draw. Takes, and I can take here. And this will fizzle out into a draw, because he will check me and then check me over here. And I have rook e2 and this is a draw. But I think he would have found the other move, which is close to winning for him. Queen c5 check. And the idea is that he first checks me, making me tuck my king into the corner. And then only then he takes. And the difference is that I can no longer take this pawn because that would fail. To rook d1 check and checkmate on the next move. Rook e1 is the only move and rook takes e1 seals the deal. So that's the difference. One small check, not taken immediately, but first using the queen's power to deliver this check. Very instructive. You should always look, as probably your coaches told you, for checks, captures, and attacks. Checks is the first thing that should come to mind. So first, before capturing, you should examine the check. And the check is the best move in this position. And if I draw back with my knight here, he can just take the rook. Now it's fine. I don't have this mating attack in this variation, and even perpetual check. So probably he would have found this, so I'm not too bitter about not finding this rook sacrifice. I was considering it again, but I decided against it. I decided to take the pawn. I thought it's safer, but this allows queen b6, trading the queens. It's actually even not the best move. He had stronger moves. The computer gives rook f8 with some slight advantage for black. But queen b6 is also logical, avoiding all those traps. And now we enter the endgame where I have this knight against this bishop. But there is a problem with my knight. It's very active. It's controlling this square, not allowing the king to move forward. It's controlling this square. It's controlling this square. But you know what? You know what the problem of this knight is? It has no moves where it cannot get taken. So all his moves, all the positions where my knight could end up, c8, c6, d5, f5, g6, g8, they are all protected by enemy's pieces. And my knight cannot move. This is crazy. My knight got stuck. It was grazing some grass on enemy's territory, and it got stuck. And it's in a very juicy position with lots of grass around to graze. But at some point of time, the grass will end. He will run out of it, and he will need new territories, but there are none. So I was afraid a little bit at this point. I was convinced that I should have a better position. Before that, my conviction was wrong. You can see the evaluation bar. Black is a little bit better. And I panic a little bit in this position. I think, what do I do? Thankfully, he cannot go here, pinning my knight, because then I will have a check, knight g6 with a check. And once the knight is taken, I take his rook. So, or this rook first, yeah. So this would have been impossible, but he can attack me with his bishop, for example, like bishop f8, and somehow I was a little bit worried about the future of my knight. Also, this rook is pinning my knight, and now it can, even if it had places to go, safe places to go, it couldn't do that because my rook on e1 is hanging. So I decided maybe I'll rotate my rook to the 7th rank, and that seemed like the most logical approach because rooks on the 7th are usually a menace. And I didn't have too much time. I also calculated some variations. I didn't actually calculate, I didn't have time, but I thought about some variations with h4, h5. So the idea would be, for example, if he just stands idly and does nothing, to go h5, and if he takes, I will have this square for my knight. So probably I could move the rook first to avoid this pin, and then move my knight to f5. This is like the idea that I was considering, but I thought, you know what? I'll first go rook c1. He'll probably go bishop e5 to prevent me from entering the 7th rank, because this is a dangerous position and he wouldn't want me to achieve it. And after bishop e5, I would go h4. And that was my plan. So I go rook c1, and he looks at me like, what are you doing, man? Are you stupid? And he makes the move bishop d4 check. And this is the position where I realized that I'm in deep trouble, because I just missed the check. You should always consider checks, captures, and threats. And I ignored that rule. You should also consider checks, captures, and threats of your opponent, not just your checks, captures, and threats. And this is a very powerful check because I have to move my king. If I move to h1, for example, this first rank will get weak, and he will win my knight probably because of the weakness of my first rank. For example, he can go, I think, here. Yeah, and my knight has no squares. And if I protect it like here, like this, he can take, and if I take, then rook d1. So I cannot take the bishop on e7, and I'm down a piece. So king h1 is out of question. I go king f1, but I realize that he has rook f8, and he does it. But after first attacking the knight with bishop c5, also he blocks this line, so I cannot enter. So I have to defend. And now he has rook f8, and I realize that I'm losing. Because if I take, he takes with a check, and my king has to move somewhere, and this square is taken by his bishop. And if I go here, which is the only legal move, he just takes my knight, because my rook is no longer protecting it, which is tragic. So after rook f8, I cannot take the rook. My only move is rook f3. But then he takes. And here he has many ways to move. He told me after the game that he initially intended to go rook d2, and this is also completely winning. He will check me, he will take all of my pawns, and yeah, this is losing. But then he decided, you know what? I can just march my king g7. And here I realized that this is over. And this is so symbolic because in the previous game, you must have, you could have watched my video on that. Watch it if you haven't. I managed to capture his horse. I managed to catch it on the board. His horse, his knight, didn't have any squares to go to. This was very instructive also in an endgame. And in this game, he managed to disallow my knight from any movement, and now I cannot move all the squares I've taken. All the squares are protected by his pieces. My knight cannot go anywhere. It's beautifully positioned here in the enemy's territory, but it will get taken. It's not a Trojan horse. There is no like trap. There is no opportunity for me to use this. I'm just losing because I make like, okay, a3, nonsensical move. He goes king f6, for example. And next he will take the horse, and the horse cannot escape. This is so tragic. So in this position, after he went king g7, I practically ran out of time, but when I had like 5 seconds on the clock, I resigned because I didn't see any way forward. And once he takes my knight, I'm definitely losing down a piece. So yeah, I couldn't crush the ALEKHINE's defense. This was the plot twist. How did you like the game? Please write your comments. I'm eagerly waiting for them and your feedback, and see you in the next one. I'll try to get my revenge in the next training game.